I was like, oh my gosh, we're only on mile 6 or 7. My quads are talking to me. Like they are really talking to me. Like it feels like I just did 200 wall balls in a workout or a whole bunch of thrusters. And I'm like, oh boy, like I have a long way to go at this point.
Welcome back to the IBEX Training podcast. We are back from Mesa. Kristi smashed her 3-hour marathon PR, and we're going to talk all about nutrition, how we ate prior to the race, or how Kristi ate prior to the race, what she ate during, kind of how we prepped in the couple days before, what her warm-ups looked like, and kind of all the details leading into and during the race. So how are you feeling, Kristi?
Relieved, happy, just like I can exhale and just continuing to process and kind of just think back on all the training that I did and the effort that I put forth.
So your goal was a sub 3-hour marathon, and leading up with all your training runs, kind of the data that we had, we knew it was realistic for you to potentially hit sub 250. And, you know, sub 3 hours was your original goal, but it kind of got shifted as we saw the likelihood that you were going to be below that and potentially even under, you know, another barrier, which is, 2 hours and 50 minutes. Did that create kind of an extra pressure for you as race day came, knowing that your ambitions had kind of grown as the race got closer?
Definitely created a little extra pressure for myself. I started to realize that I thought maybe I was fitter than I knew I was when I did that 21-mile run, and then I turned around and did a 22-mile run the next week, which normally you would give yourself an off week, but because of when I started training for this, I didn't have that. And I did my 21-miler, and then my 22-miler, my average pace was 6:40 for 22 miles. And I was like, wow, if I would have just held on to that, I would have run like a 2:55 or 2:57 marathon in training. And that was coming off of an 18 and 18, a 20, a 21 with no breaks in between. And so in my head, I started to recognize, like, I think I can actually run close to a 250. But then I was like, well, I'm not totally sure if I could run close to 250 because I've been setting my goal at 3 hours. So it did add a little pressure because I thought that I did think it was possible. And I started to believe that it was possible the more I looked at the data. But then I was like, are you crazy? Like, I don't know if you can actually do that. That would be like a huge PR. And so it was just kind of like a constant battle in my head of like, should I go for it? But what if I go for it and I blow up and then I miss the 3 hour altogether? Or should I just hold back and play it conservative? And so that was kind of the battle that I was dealing with.
That's a ginormous PR from 304, especially at that level. Going from a 304 to a 248 is a lot of time to shave off at an already fast marathon pace.
Yeah, I shaved off about 16 minutes. And it was interesting too, because it was, they say it's a faster course, but I actually struggled a bit with the course, which we can talk about the course profile, just because of where I have to train. And also I was training on a treadmill at times. And so I was really, really happy, but this course I thought was actually really hard in a lot of spots. And so, yeah, I was just happy to, one, PR, but two, hit my goal.
I think that'd be another kind of big point. And I'd be curious, or I think a lot of people would be curious what it was like going from training in the winter here, not doing all road running, but doing a lot of running on a treadmill. And when running was outside, you're bundled up, it's freezing, and then running the race where there's, some humidity, sunshine, and, quite a bit more heat.
Yeah, it was a really, really big adjustment. And they always say that you should train in the conditions that you're going to race in. And that just was not an option for me. So we don't have hills, and we literally have hardly any elevation. Like I would go seek it out and there's just nothing. And we also, it was, 5 degrees when I was running outside. Very rarely was it over 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And when I was racing, that start morning was 53. I haven't had any time to acclimate to that heat. And I just knew like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be wearing my salt. Like this is going to be very, very tough, just trying to adjust your body when you're used to training in the cold. And so those were two things I was not able to prepare for. And I definitely felt during the race, but that was just kind of knowing, like going into it, that you can't control those things. And even when we went to check in and I was talking to somebody, it's like, oh, it's going to be beautiful. Like I was just focused on that the sun was going to be out and there wasn't snow and ice on the ground. Like I was just so excited about that. And then I got to run in shorts and a tank top rather than having 2 pairs of tights on and 3 long sleeve t-shirts and a hat and 2 pairs of gloves. I was just like focused on those things. And he was like, well, it's going to be considerably warmer than we like to see here. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, normally it's like upper 30s, low 40s, which is what I was anticipating. He was like, it's going to be low to mid 50s at the start in the dark. I was like, oh no, like that is way hotter than I had even anticipated when I signed up for this race. So I don't typically like the heat, but it was again, something out of my control and I couldn't change it. So I just had to accept it.
And it was beautiful. It did end up being a sunny day, and like by all metrics, like it was a great day for the race. A little bit warmer than maybe, perfectly ideal, but drastically warmer than what you've been training in. So even though it wasn't necessarily hot out, it felt warm in comparison to what we've been used to all winter.
Yeah, we actually started the race in the dark, and I also don't like to run in the dark. I was sitting on the bus with this guy heading to the race, and we were talking about running, and he does all of his morning runs. He even runs the Mesa course. He runs in the dark. And I was like, but we'll be able to see some sun, right? And he was like, no, this is his 4th year doing this race. They take you up to a mountain. He's like, it's going to be like pitch black up there. It was actually pitch black. And that messes with my pace because I don't do a ton of running in the dark. I just don't love it. And I was like, man, it makes me feel weird when I'm running, like knowing like what that pace is going to be. But yeah, it was nice starting in the dark because it was a little bit cooler and you didn't have the sun on your back. But when that sun came out, holy smokes, you felt the sun. It was like, and there it is, and it's not going away.
And maybe before we even get into the race, we'll go through kind of some of the pre-race stuff, because I think a lot of people are interested in that. And we get a ton of questions about kind of what to do as far as exercise before race, what to do for nutrition. So maybe a couple days out, we'll start there with what your runs looked like, what your exercise activity looked like, and nutrition prior, and then, kind of morning of the race. So we got in 2 days before, we got in a little bit later, and you went for a super short, easy run on Friday.
It's Thursday.
Sorry, my days are off.
Because the race was Saturday, not Sunday.
That's right. So yeah, race was Saturday. So Thursday you went for a super easy run. Pace wise, what was that at for you in comparison to what you ran at? How far did you go and how did you feel?
Thursday, we also got delayed in travel, so that threw me off a little bit. So I didn't get to do that shakeout until about 5 p.m. Arizona time. I went for 4 miles, which would be 7 p.m. in Columbus time. So I had planned to do it prior to leaving Columbus, but our flight was early. So I didn't want to get up at 4 a.m. because sleep at that point is super important. Like, you want to be recovering into this race. So I was like, oh, I'll just do it when we get there. We were supposed to get there at like 12 or 1. I think we ended up getting to our hotel closer to 5 just because there was terrible weather in Columbus. So I was like, oh, should I even do this shakeout? Like, yes, I need to do it. So I went out for that 4 mile, super, super easy run. I was running about an 8:30 pace, maybe a little bit under, and I didn't even feel like I was trying. Like, I didn't feel good, but I also didn't feel like I was trying. And it was kind of like, that was the first moment that I was like, okay, I think taper's finally starting to come to fruit. Like, everything's starting to fall into place, because I had been feeling honestly like crap the whole 7 days prior to that, maybe even a little bit longer. And I kept telling you that, man, I am feeling terrible. And so when I was doing that 4 mile shakeout, my heart rate was a lot higher than I wanted it to be. And I think that I just chalked that up to some travel and sitting all day. And then also getting into this hotter climate, because it was quite warm at 5 p.m. and I was sweating, but I didn't feel like I was trying when I was running those paces. I was like, okay, this is a good sign.
So I think that's also a testament to how important deloads actually are. I think a lot of people enjoy the training, and when they're peaking, they feel really fit. And it's like you're afraid you're going to lose that fitness by taking a deload. And it doesn't necessarily some people don't feel great during deloads. Some people feel excellent. You tend to be one that doesn't feel as good during the deloads, but you did start coming back around. It was clearly effective and it did work, and the timing was right.
I felt terrible during my deload, where I was like, man, I just want to go hit a hard workout. I want to go lift some weights. I want to go to the track. I want to go do some pace runs. Like, when I was doing that 22 mile run that we talked about at the start of this, when it was going into that, feeling so heavy and so tired, but I felt so good during that race. So it's really hard to pull back and feel like, wow, I'm feeling so crappy. Like, I was feeling good when I was doing all this work. Like, if I pull back, am I really going to feel good? And so it's just trusting the training and the process and trusting the deload. And they're absolutely necessary. And yeah, we nailed it.
Thursday was also the day you started to need to carb load, which can be a little bit of a challenging thing to do, because we eat pretty clean, we eat pretty normal. And the idea is not to start eating new foods, 2 days before a big event or big race. So doubling or more than doubling your carbs a day is literally, it's a physical challenge for you to be able to consume that many calories without just going to stuff that's totally outside the norm of what we would be eating on a regular basis.
Yeah, I had committed to this carb load. So actually Thursday was like the biggest, or one of the biggest day, but we started Wednesday night. So I had pasta and just like a bunch of carbs starting Wednesday afternoon. And then Thursday morning, I made sure to have carbs. I took 4 applesauce packets on the plane with me. I ate all 4 of them. I took a Go bar. I ate that, or 3 Go bars. I think I ate 2 of them and you ate 1 of them. I took bagels with me. Everywhere we stopped, I would get more carbs, and I was keeping track in my phone. So I wasn't just recklessly eating, but I was like, I know I need to get ahead of this because this is going to be really, really hard to do if I don't do it throughout the day. So I even was like, hey, Patrick, can you give me some orange juice? I can't tell you the last time I drank orange juice, but it depends on like how the glycogen gets stored in your liver versus your muscles. And you want to make sure that you're able to store it so you have it readily available. It takes 48 to 72 hours. So we've talked about this before to build up those glycogen stores. If you start the night before, you are too late. You have to start upwards of 3 days before. But you also have to toe the line of knowing that like you're not stuffing yourself the night before the race. So your GI doesn't get super upset race morning because you're getting up super early, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But yeah, so Thursday I was just like, carbs, carbs, carbs. I ate like 3 bowls of cereal that night. I made you take me to Whole Foods. I came out with 4 coconut waters, a loaf of bread, more bagels, cereal, like all these things, fruit. And it's like things that I knew that I'd eaten before when I was training for the games, but I hadn't eaten them in so long. And this became a chore. So I was aiming for 4 to 6 grams per pound of body weight. I ended up getting about 650 grams of carbs in on Thursday. And I woke up in the night sweats. On Friday morning, I told you, I was like, I was sweating. So of course I'm like on Google and Chat GPT, like, is this normal? Like when you're carb loading? And you told me it was, but I just needed to read every source of information because I never experienced that when I was training for CrossFit.
And sticking with the carb loading, huh?
Yes, carb loading.
Yeah. And we don't eat cereal. It's not even something we keep in the house. Like, but they're not completely outside of the realm of something that you did eat during training for the games that we knew would settle. And it got to a point where there's only so much rice and chicken you can eat because we are traveling. So a lot of it is, cleaner things that you can kind of order, get in bulk because we're staying in a hotel. So it is near impossible to get 600 grams of carbs in just eating, really clean. So we had to kind of step outside the box a little bit in order for you to, get even close to what you're hoping to shoot or hoping to hit.
Yeah, so that night I was like, Patrick, I'm like 200 grams of carbs under when we were getting ready to go to bed. So you ran down to the lobby and he got me some gummy bears, which again, I don't eat candy. That's just not something that we keep in the house. You got me a Gatorade. I had already had orange juice, but Gatorade's going to be a good way to do it. And then, which I also don't love Gatorade, and I didn't end up drinking all of that because there's something in it that can upset your stomach, but I knew I was 48 hours from the race, so I wasn't super concerned. And then you also got me pretzels I tried them and I started eating. I'm like, wow, I don't remember the last time I've had like a bag of pretzels. These taste really, really funny. Like they're almost kind of disgusting. I must just be really full. And then I looked at the date and they were over a year expired. So then I'm going to bed, not only stuffed from carb loading, feeling just like absolutely disgusting. And now I'm worried that I'm going to get sick from eating these pretzels that are like 14 months expired.
That was not my fault. I just got the pretzels that they had. I didn't know I needed to check expiration dates, but they were definitely expired and they were not good. I was a little skeptical. I thought that might be something that doesn't really go bad or taste bad, but they 100% did.
It definitely went bad. So always check your expiration dates.
How do you feel Friday? So we've got, 24 hours or less till the race actually starts. It's kind of tends to feel like a long day because there's not a whole lot to do. You don't want to do a whole lot of running or exercising. You just want to kind of lay low. But the race is coming.
Yeah, so Friday I woke up, I had another bagel. So bagels were the theme of the weekend. I had a little bit of nut butter with a banana and honey, which is also what I ate race morning, which we'll talk about. So I ate that even though I was not hungry when I woke up. And then I did a 2-mile just shakeout, like really, really slow, just 2 miles, just moving my body. And the whole point of this is because of the routine. Like I don't really love to run after a rest day and after all the travel. Like, I'm just trying to get my blood flowing, keep the routine. And honestly, it's probably more for mental than physical at that point. I know some people probably like to take that rest day before their race, but I'm not one that likes to do that. So then we did that shakeout and then we went and checked in. And I love check-in. It just makes me so excited. You finally are getting your bib. You're getting to see everybody you're racing with. And it's just, the energy is so high and the atmosphere is so great. It's one of my favorite things. And then we hopped in the car and we actually drove the course, which is the first time that we've ever done this. And this was actually your idea. And I'm really glad that we did do it.
Yeah, it's a very different race in comparison to like Columbus because it is just like a straight out. So you get bussed out in the morning. It's not a loop. And having some sort of idea what that was going to look like, because it does have some downhill elevation and also some uphill elevation, to just have a general gauge of where those hills were going to be, what it was going to look like, and just kind of having, a little bit of an idea where you were on the during the race. And then it also gave me an idea of where to kind of be to where I could catch you at certain points throughout the race as well.
Yeah, I think that drive that we did was the most helpful thing. So if you guys are racing out of town and you have the opportunity to drive the course or see parts of it, I think that can be really, really helpful, because for me, not only was it understanding the magnitude of the downhill into the uphill, because everybody at check-in was telling me you're going to take a hard 90-degree turn and you are going to go straight uphill. And I'm like, oh no, like I don't have hills in Ohio. Like what kind of hill is this going to be? So when we drove that, I was like, okay, this is like long and steady. Like I can do that. I can grind for a long, steady period. It's not me just running up this 20% incline hill. Yes, it's 2 miles, but I can do that. And then understanding the downhills. The other piece that I really liked was understanding the long straights. And this was different just because I wasn't familiar with this town, but there were some really long, boring, straight, flat roads, like really long, like 3.5, 4 miles at a time. And I don't ever remember that in any of the other races that I've done, where you're just on this road flat and there's nothing to see and you're just running. And it just feels like it's taking forever to get to your next turn. And seeing that in the car was actually really helpful. It's like, wow, if we're driving this for 6 minutes, it's going to take me significantly longer to run this straight. And so just knowing when I got into those points during the race, that was really helpful. So I did enjoy driving the course. However, I had moments where I was like, wow, this feels like it's taking us forever. Like, how long is this going to take me to run this? So there were the pros and cons to driving it. Understanding the course profile was great, but then also like, can I actually run this? This feels like it's taking us forever in the car. How am I actually going to run all of this? I looked at you and said that at one point. So that was a little bit of a con, but I am glad in the end that we did it. Throughout that entire drive, I was pumping hydration. So I always, knowing that it was going to be hotter, and we can talk about this, I was doubling up on electrolytes. I had orange juice with me to help put more carbs in. And I was just constantly aware of drinking and eating. And that is like your job, that 72 to 48 hours out before a race like this.
And then morning of, you had to be bussed to the start line, which was also different. And, waking up super early. So what do we get up at 3:30, 3:40?
Yeah, right around there.
And literally you got out of bed and walked directly over to the kitchen and started eating a bagel.
Yeah, that is not something I normally do. So I tapered off my carbs Friday afternoon, which I think is also notable and really helpful. So I really loaded Thursday and Friday morning through midday. And then I slowly tapered off. So that way I wouldn't feel stuffed when I woke up, because I knew how important it was going to be to eat, because we're getting up at 3 o'clock to 3:30, 3:40, and the race doesn't start until 6:30. So that's already 3 hours prior to the race. So then you have a 3-hour race. So you need to be fueled. So I literally, alarm went off. I swung my feet over, put them on the floor, and went straight to the kitchen, and just didn't even try not to think, just shoved food down as fast as I could, because once I get nervous, I have a hard time eating. So it's like, don't think, you know what you need to eat. So I ate a bagel and a half with a little bit of nut butter, a full banana, and a ton of honey. And I don't even know if I chewed it. I just tried to shove it in so fast. And then I drank a full 20-ounce bottle with a scoop of electrolytes as well with that.
After you ate, we had a little bit of time, got up early enough so that you could eat without it being too close to the race, because you don't want a full stomach when you're headed out. But the race itself, as far as attendance, was drastically smaller than, say the Columbus Marathon, which we've been to a few times. But because everybody was bussed out to the start line, it looked like a ton of people, and it looked like a ton of buses. I mean, they were lying down multiple streets, and there was people that were, 3 blocks deep in a line to get on these buses, which was, something, it was cool, but it was definitely unique.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I actually was expecting like 2,000 or 3,000 people in this race. And I think they said it was like closer to 7 or 8. So it was like 50%, maybe even upwards of 10,000. So like 50% to 75% of the size of the Columbus Marathon. But it felt huge. When we were walking to the bus line, I could not believe how many buses and how many people were in line. They say it's getting bigger every year.
Yeah, that actually makes more sense. I still had the 3,000-ish number in my head, and it felt like more. So that makes sense that there was more people actually there. But in comparison, because everybody's lining up to get on buses, it still felt like so many more people in such a bigger event, just because of the way it was structured.
Yeah. So these point A to point B, they usually bus you out like we talked about. So the buses started running around like 4:15 in the morning, and they ran through 5:15. So I was like, okay, we'll get there, kind of right in the middle. I think everybody did that. We got there right around 4:40, give or take. And it took a long time to get on the bus. By the time we got onto the bus, they did an amazing job, by the way. They were very organized, but the bus ride took a while. So got on the bus probably around 5, give or take, if it took 20 minutes to get through that line. We didn't pull up. They took us some back way to where we got dropped off until about 5:55 or 6 o'clock. And the race started at 6:30. And everybody I was with on the bus is like, we all thought we were going to be there by like 5:30 or earlier, not thinking it would take one, that long to get on the bus, and two, that long to get bus there. So I literally got off the bus. I knew I had to go to the restroom. Like I had to pee before this race started. So I went straight to the porta potty lines, and they were so long. I was like, I'm going to miss the start of the race. But everybody was in line. And not only, I also had to drop my bag. So I went straight to the line and got in line at, let's say 5:55, 6 o'clock. I got out of the line at probably like 6:18, ran over, dropped my bag. Literally by the time I dropped my bag and walked to the starting corral, the race was starting. I've never experienced a race like that in my life. Like usually I'm like hanging out, just trying to warm up. There was no time to do anything. I did a couple toe touches, I pulled my knee into my chest a few times, and it was 3, 2, 1, go.
The place that you started was challenging to get to. So we knew where the start was. We drove there the day before, and Bennett came out with this because he's going to make a documentary about this as well. And we thought maybe we'd be able to catch the start of the race, but because it starts out in the middle of nowhere and it's on, a single road, we couldn't get even close. So I think we caught you the first time at about mile 3, and it was still dark out, and the tracking was not super accurate yet and wasn't for most of the race. And I've told you guys that I have been encouraging Kristi to start out a little bit warmer and not build into her miles so quickly or build into her pace. And her tracker was showing that she was at like a 9:30 pace. And I thought maybe she had just got stuck in a group that she couldn't get around, but turns out that it just wasn't accurate. And you did do a really good job starting at closer to race pace.
Yeah, I started at a 6:18 pace. That was not the plan, but it was a downhill start. And so I like to try to talk to people back there. Everybody's super friendly. People are excited. And so I found the 3-hour pace group, and then I noticed there was a 2:55, and that's because that's a Boston qualifying time. So now they have a 2:55. I was like, okay, cool. I'll hang between the 2:55 and 3 hour because my goal is to be under 3 hours. This seems like a good spot to beat. So I was talking to the guy next to me and I was like, have you heard anything? Have you run this course before? He's like, they say go out at about 20 seconds faster than what you're hoping to hold, and then ditch your pacing up the hill, which I had already planned to do. That was my plan in itself. You never want to worry about hills. You want to go more off RPE, because if you're running uphill and you're trying to hold this pace and you just blow yourself out because you're trying to hold a pace, now you're screwed. So I wanted to pull back and go like 6, 7 RPE to where I felt good. I knew it'd be fine to come out of it and then get back onto pace. 3, 2, 1, go though. It's pitch black. We're at the top of this mountain, and all of a sudden everybody takes off like it's a 100-meter dash. And so it's like, I don't want to get run over by the people behind me, and I just kind of want to hold my spot. So I was just going with it. And when I saw 6:18 take over in that first mile, I was like, oh boy, here we go. And I saw somebody go down. And so people all got kind of tripped up in that pile. And so it's like, whatever you do, just keep running, don't fall. You'll be fine. Just focus on your breathing. So I was constantly breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, just trying to like keep my heart rate nice and low, because I was running at a pace significantly faster than I wanted to be running. And I also knew that was going to affect my quads coming later on, just because I'm not used to running downhill. And I think downhill is actually harder than running uphill. So yeah, it was a really interesting way to start out the race, but I was proud of myself for just going with it.
At the 4-mile mark, there is a sharp right turn, and it was a big hill. Like driving that, people told us like, hey, there's a hill that you got to run up. But when we drove it, I was like, this is bigger and longer than I was expecting.
Yeah, it's actually a hill, and I like hills though. I feel like being strong, that it was something I was looking forward to. And it's amazing what happened at that hill. Is like everybody was so aware, and I think they were like anxious and nervous for the hill. All of a sudden, everybody's pace just pulled back drastically. I ended up I was running up the hill. I looked back, it was 6:40s. And that to me was like, wow, I'm proud of myself for running 6:40 up that hill. But I was just going off of feel. And I was passing people up the hill, which was like, oh gosh, like I hope I'm not shooting myself in the foot. But I felt really good. And I was just going off RPE, not worrying about in my head, trying to not think about, oh, I'm running up this hill, just trying to think about feeling good and feeling light. And I think that sometimes when you know there's a hill, like you can get anxious and you can almost psych yourself out about the hill, and maybe instead of listening to how you're feeling. So I was just trying to zone in and focus on myself. I don't wear headphones when I run, and I just listen to my body, and I try to listen to, what is my body telling me? Is anything talking to me? How do I feel? Can I keep this pace? And I just tried to do that up the hill.
I think that's a really good testament to strength training, though, to be able to get into a hill and just start pulling away from people rather than dying or your legs feeling heavy. It's like, wasn't even a big deal.
100%. And that is absolutely, strong legs is going to get you up and down those hills and help you feel fresh.
Speaking of strength, I tried figuring this out, and I don't even think you give yourself credit for how fit and strong you are. But I don't think that there's anybody that is even close that's got, you have almost a 3 times body weight deadlift and a 2:48 marathon. I don't think that there aren't many men who can do that. Not even triple body weight. I mean, you've got a 380 deadlift. I don't think that there are many men who can deadlift 380 pounds and run a 2:48 marathon, much less women. So I think that is a wild stat. And when we kind of talk about the hybrid athlete, I think the deadlift is probably the pinnacle of just brute pure strength. I mean, we could use a squat number as well. You have a very strong squat, but I think that's extremely impressive. And I couldn't find anybody that was even close. I think that there were some women that had a double body weight deadlift and a sub 3 hour marathon, but I don't think you even understand how wild that is.
Just a lot of hard work, time, consistent, and showing up for yourself. I've never really thought of it. I don't look at stats like that. I just show up and try to do my best. And that's something that I love. So that's actually really cool. I'm like doing the math in my head. Like, is he right?
Yeah, I mean,
I need a calculator.
I mean, there could be somebody or some people that I'm unaware of, but I couldn't even find anyone close. And I think that is a, pretty cool stat to be kind of a one of one potentially in the world of somebody who's capable of doing that.
That is very cool. Yeah, I'm really proud of that. And I feel like that strength helped on the ups and the downs though, because so once we got to the top of the hill, you have to come down. And this was the last hill until the course basically flattened out. And so you kind of get all of it out of the way at the start. And we were running downhill and I was running with 2 guys. Like I always like to try to catch people. Like I like to run with people. That's why I'm doing these races. I don't want to be in a dead zone and running by myself. And we were talking at one point and one guy was like, wow, my quads, like I really feel my quads. And I was like, as soon as he said that, it was like, it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, we're only on mile 6 or 7. My quads are talking to me. Like they are really talking to me. Like it feels like I just did 200 wall balls in a workout or a whole bunch of thrusters. And I'm like, oh boy, like I have a long way to go at this point. So then I'm like, get it out of your head. Like you've had sore quads your whole life, in your entire career, right?
Pretty close.
Yeah. Your whole life. You've had sore quads, you showed up and you know how to compete and you've had some of your best workouts with sore legs. You are fine. But then it's like, oh no, I hope they don't cramp, because it kind of feels like that. And you're like, if I cramp, it's over. And so it's like getting those thoughts out of your head and just finding something to focus on. So I started focusing on the crowd. I started reading all of the signs, and then I had to get away from that pack because I didn't want to hear them talk about their quads anymore, because that was just putting it in my head. So that was a really interesting thing that I hadn't experienced before.
And you did find a couple people to run with during.
Yeah, on accident. So this kind of always happens. Like I always hope that I can find a group, and each race I've been able to. So I don't know how that's happened, but I didn't find my group until about mile 16 or mile 15. So I was constantly just kind of like striding to get to the next person, because if I felt really good at my pace, I was like, okay, they're running a little bit faster. Can I stride up to get with them and then let them pull me through? And at one point it was like mile 15 or 16, give or take. And I somehow got into this pack, and there were a bunch of young guys. And I was like, they all seem like they're floating. Like, this is great. I'm just going to try and stay with these people. And the guy to my right said, hey guys, there's 3 guys leading. They were really young. And he was like, what's your goal pace? And we're at mile 16, and they're like, we would like to run a 2:50. Nobody says anything. It just gets quiet and just goes back to hearing everybody's feet. So I look over at the guy who asked him, like, well, what's your goal pace? And he goes, 2:55, but I feel great. So I'm going to hang with these guys as long as I can. And he looked back at me, he goes, well, what about you? And I was like, I was just hoping for sub 3 hours, but I feel great too. So I'm just going to try to hang. And he just started laughing. So there was about 5 or 6 of us that just kept running. And all of a sudden, like the 3 that were leading kind of started to slow down, like to a 6:40. And we knew that to run a 2:50, you're going to have to be a 6:29. So the kid next to me was like, I still feel good. And I was like, yeah, me too. He was from Indiana. I was like, let's go. So the 2 of us just stuck together from 16 miles on, and we didn't really speak. We would speak a little bit. And then finally I was like, okay, we should stop talking. We need to save our energy. And then we would just be like, what'd your watch say at that mile? And so we'd make sure our watches were kind of syncing up, and one watch wasn't like drastically off GPS wise, but it was just helpful just to have somebody just to run with. And he ended up running a 2:49 and I ran a 2:48, and I ended up waiting at the finish line to give him a hug, because it was like, I couldn't have done that without him. It was just so enjoyable. And he happened to be from Indiana as well. And so it's just nice when you can like sync up with people in these races and have someone to run with.
Yeah, it was stressful for me towards the end because the GPS or the tracker kept being delayed. So it'd be delayed for like 3 miles before we'd catch up again. And I don't know what that was, whether it was the system or the tracker wasn't picking up or the app wasn't working, but it was showing you still on mile 23. So I knew like you were on pace to be around 250, but being at the finish line, especially those last, 3.5 miles, was like not knowing exactly where you were, and a lot can happen in those last few miles. So there was some anticipation for me trying to figure out where you're actually going to come in or what time you're actually going to come in at.
Yeah, we were doing the same thing. He kept asking me about math. He's like, are we on pace? I'm like, I don't know if we're on pace. I'm just running. And so then I'm like trying to do backwards math in my head, thinking about our mile splits because I like numbers. And he'd be like, that was a 6:20. Do you think we're on pace? And I'm like, hold on. Like if we run 3 more 6:20s, that's going to put us at 18 minutes, 19 minutes. Okay. But sometimes the course is longer. So we need to account for a little bit extra. And he was just, I think, kind of laughing at me as I'm like doing all of this. I'm like, yeah, I think we're on pace. But then I didn't want to tell him we're on pace and be wrong. So then I was like, we better run a little bit faster. So we kind of kept picking up the pace, but it was just hard to know. And those last 4 miles, those were really, really hard miles. And he kept asking me if there was downhill to end the race. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not from here. I've never run this race. And I can tell you there felt like there was no downhill except for at the start, which is all the reviews that I read. It said it like pretty much flattened out and you were just in the city, which was fine. I didn't mind at all, but I would prefer flat than uphill.
Yeah, actually, I thought it was really interesting because the race, they had talked about it. People had said that like it does have like a fair amount of downhill elevation, but it seems like a very flat race. There's just kind of a big downhill in the beginning, which can kind of blow your quads up, right into a big uphill, then a little bit of downhill, and then the vast majority of the race is just flat.
That's how it felt. Yeah. Yeah. And so for us, that son, he also said he didn't really train on lots of elevation. So it wasn't just me, but we really started to feel the sun around mile 16, mile 18. And that sun started to come out. And there was points where I started to get the chills. And I was so hot from the sun, but I was sweating so much. And then the wind would come and I just wasn't adjusted to it. And I'm like, oh man, 10 more miles and I've got the chills. Like this isn't good. But again, it's one of those things where you just kind of put it out of your head and you just keep running. You're like, I'm just going to stick with this pace. I feel good. Like no matter who you are, when you're running a race like this and you're running at an uncomfortable pace, that's like, I just want to slow down because it would be easier. You're going to have thoughts that pop into your head, but it's how can you kind of stifle and quiet those thoughts that you just keep going. And for me, I knew that if I did slow down when I didn't actually need to slow down, then I was going to be upset with myself when I finished. So I would constantly check in with myself and be like, do you just want to slow down because you're lazy and you don't feel like running this hard? Or do you actually physically need to slow down? And a lot of the time I'd be like, I just want to slow down just because, but it's like, no, I don't actually want to slow down. I want to keep running hard. So there was a lot of moments in the race that were really fun, mentally and physically.
Kind of circling back to the beginning, we forgot to touch on the shoes, which you had quite the issue determining what you were going to wear. And that did not change up until we were literally getting on the bus. You took 2 pairs of shoes out, still undecided which ones you're going to race in. And right before you got on the bus, you were almost going to have me run up and switch for you.
Yeah, this was the hardest decision I've ever had. I don't ever remember a race where I've had a harder decision. And I got up early, walked around the room in both of them, ended up being like, okay, I'm going to go with Saucony, however you guys say it. And then Pat looks over and I'm throwing the Nikes in my race bag, my drop bag. So that way I could still make the decision when I got up there if I wanted to switch. And then finally I was like, okay, this is stressing me out. I don't need to take 2 pairs of shoes. So I literally handed Pat the Nikes, made him go throw them in the car as we come down, like as we're walking to the buses, he throws them in the car. Then I'm about in line on the buses and I'm looking at everybody else's shoes. And I'm like, everybody has Nikes on. Like, did I make the wrong decision? And so I just like couldn't stop looking at everyone's shoes. And I whispered to Pat, I'm like, can you go and get my Nikes? And he's like, are you serious? And I was like, no, I'm not serious. I'm fine. So then I get on the bus and I had a moment of like, oh my gosh, I chose the wrong pair. My feet are hurting. And I was like so anxious about it. But then it's like, you chose these, you like them, just settle in. Like it's not the shoe that's going to make you run the race. And I think in my head, I just felt like there's so much talk around these super shoes that I was going to make a wrong decision. But in the end, I've done all the work. And that shoe, like maybe it helped me run a little bit faster, but it's not going to just make me run 20 minutes faster. Like that's not how this works. And so just trusting in what I chose. And I did end up going with Saucony and I loved them. They were great. I went with those because they had a little bit more. It was more of a shoe than the Vaporfly. And I felt like it would give me more towards the end of the race. And I am happy that I went with those. Like my feet felt great. I felt great the whole race, like no cramping. So I was good with my decision.
I think that just shows it gives you something to kind of focus on, to worry about. There's so much anticipation before the race. It's like you kind of are looking for something where it's like, maybe this isn't right, or maybe I didn't choose what I should have. And you look around at everybody else and it's like, well, I'm seeing more of something else, that everybody else has on. But one, it doesn't matter what everybody else is doing. It's like, you already put in the work. There's nothing you're going to do within these last, 24 hours that's going to change that. So making a decision, sticking with it, and just going out there and running hard.
And I do think that's it. It's just you look to put your worry on something that you can control. Like, I can't control the weather, so I can't keep worrying about that. But the shoes was something I could control because that was a choice I was going to be making. And I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get to the end of the race and have like totally battered feet and be like, dang it, I made the wrong decision. But I knew both of them were so comfortable, and I knew that whichever choice I made was going to be fine. It was just something to worry about.
Back to the finish of the race, it was warm, and being in the sun, it was like you could feel it. And there was quite a few people who like it clearly got to. I mean, there was multiple people who finished the race and just like threw up immediately. Bennett said there were some people that had thrown up in the elevator. There were some people getting kind of wheeled off in wheelchairs. So it definitely took a toll on people. And I think that largely has to do with either nutrition or hydration, or sometimes just overexertion. But that in combination with the heat can definitely mess people up.
Yeah, I definitely think that's your electrolyte balance and hydration, and then also nutrition and being prepared. And that also comes with that dreaded marathon wall at 19, 18, 20. Whenever you're going to hit that wall, or people tell you you're going to hit that wall, I think that also comes into factor based on nutrition. And I think a lot of that is stuff that you can control. And I was doubling up on electrolytes on Thursday and Friday. And then Saturday morning, I started with electrolytes in my bottle. And then I also had a carb drink with sodium that I drank on the bus for an additional 40 grams of carbs with an additional, I think it was 750 milligrams of sodium. And then I had gels. And so I alternated between two different kinds, and one of them had a little bit more sodium than the other. And then I would take water. So, let's talk about the gels first. I know a lot of people have questions. So I took a gel about 25 minutes before the race started. Prior to that, I drank a full bottle on the bus. So that 50 minutes that I sat on the bus, that also had carbs in it, plus the breakfast that I had. So I had a significant amount of carbs before I even stepped up to the starting line. Then my first gel, which I practiced in training, was every 4 miles. So I took my first gel at 4. I took a caffeinated gel at 8, which made me feel supercharged because I don't drink caffeine. I didn't even have caffeine like that morning. Pat and I went and got coffee and put it in the fridge, and I like took one sip. I'm like, can't do this. I'm going to be jittery the whole way. I don't drink caffeine. So I ended up taking that caffeine gel at 8, and that just kind of makes you a little bit sharper, which I really liked. Then I took another gel at 12, and then I had a double caffeinated gel at like 16.5 to 17, which made me feel like I was just like supercharged again. And then I had my last gel at around 21 to 22. And then I was stopping for water every 2 miles, starting at mile number 3 where you saw me. So I don't drink the whole cup. I just get a little bit in my mouth. So just a sip. So I would stop for water at 3, 5, 7.
Not stop, just grab.
Yeah, grab, which this was, okay, if you guys ever hand out water in a race, make sure you just put it on your palm. You just want the cup to sit there so the runner can just come through and grab it. Like, you don't want to hold tight the cup because it makes it really hard for the runner to grab it. And I've handed out water at races, and I've also run races. So this is something that I've learned over time. But there was a couple times that I felt like they didn't want to let go of their water cup, but it's because they didn't want you to drop it. They wanted to know you're having it. But when you're running at 6:20, 6:30 mile pace, like you're running fast, it's just kind of something that has to happen, like a little dance. And so if you could just set that cup of water on your palm and let somebody come through and snag it, that's the easier way to do it if you're ever handing out water. But these guys were great. The volunteers were amazing. So I started taking water at every 2 miles, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and then around 15 to 17, I think it was 17 was the first station, I started adding in a little bit of Gatorade. So the Gatorade station was actually right before the water. And I've never done this in a race before, but I started doing it here. I would go to the Gatorade and hit like the first person giving it out, get a little bit in my mouth, and then I'd hit the last water person and then like put the Gatorade down with water. So I almost like watered it down a little bit, and I feel like that was easier on my stomach. So I was actually getting 2 cups at miles 17, 19, and 21. And the reason I don't start Gatorade earlier in the race is because I don't train with what they had on course. So like I don't train with Gatorade. So I was a little bit nervous it was going to upset my stomach, but I could tell that I needed to get more electrolytes in as that sun was coming out. So that's when I started working that in later on in the race.
And then once the race finished, how'd you feel?
so good. And I learned that my mom came up, or Pat, or whoever, you guys were counting females. I was honestly crossing the line, just emotional, just relieved and shocked. Like when I saw 2:48 on the clock, I absolutely could not believe it. Like part of me knew that I had a chance to squeak under 250, but I felt like it was like we talked about at the start. I didn't have that in mind this entire time. I was just like, I just want to break 3 hours. And when you come across the line and you see 2:48 and you're like, that race went exactly how I planned it to, like pacing, when I looked at my Garmin stats, how I felt throughout the entire race. Like, yeah, there were moments of ups and downs, and there's moments where you're like, wow, I just want to slow down right now. But it could not have gone better. And I feel like I almost could have even pushed it a little bit more, but that's how I like to feel when I finish. Like I felt great. I was so excited to see everybody. And then they told me I was third female. So I got a big giant check with my name on it. Giant, like size giant. It was $150. So I got my entry fee back. That was the coolest. I've never gone to hold a big check.
That was really cool.
That was just I just lived for those moments. Like it was just the relief of, you did all of this work. You showed up on the days that you didn't feel like it. You showed up on the tough training days. You made sacrifices and it all paid off. And it doesn't always all pay off, but it's just the best feeling in the entire world. I don't even know how to explain it.
To kind of clarify as well, like your race paces, like we knew where you could be. We knew the numbers that you had to hit, but on a flat course, you have a better gauge of like, I just need to hold this pace the entire time. But when you've got a big steep downhill and then you've got a big steep uphill, that's going to throw you off a little bit. So it's a little bit harder to kind of know your exact averages since your pace isn't the exact same the entire race. Yeah.
And I had looked at pace averages for 3 hours. So I didn't exactly know, like at 18 miles, if I want to run 250, I need to be here. I didn't have those numbers in my head. So that's where that kid kept asking me, like, are we on pace? I'm like, I don't know. I think we're on pace. I'm like trying to work forwards and backwards and determine how much time we have left. And then you never know. Like I said, like some courses come out to 26.4 just because you're not running tangents and you're weaving around people. So you actually run a little bit extra. So you have to account for all of that. And so, yeah, it was fun, but it was challenging and it was good.
Then that night, we got some good food. And the very next day, we headed out to go skiing. So we actually went out to the marathon with all of our ski gear, because we actually had the ski trip planned first and squeezed this in prior. So ran your marathon, got some good food, got up the next morning and headed to Colorado to go skiing.
Yeah, I was like, I got this. And then I swung my feet around the bed the next morning, Sunday morning, to go to the airport. And I was like, my feet are really tired. And the soreness hadn't set in yet. Like my quads were really sore. But then after sitting on the airplane for like 6 hours, getting off the airplane, trying to go down steps, like up steps, totally fine, flat road, totally fine, anything downhill, because I'm not used to decelerating, like trying to stop myself from running downhill. I'm not used to that because we don't have that around here. My quads were lit up on Sunday. And I kept being like, skiing downhill is going to be really interesting tomorrow. But then Monday I woke up and I did great. We skied all Monday, no problems. I was a little bit nervous that I wasn't gonna be able to ski and I was gonna ruin the ski trip for everybody. I was just gonna be hanging out in the hot tub, but no problems. Like I flushed that soreness out right away and skied all week. I was maybe a little bit more conservative, a little bit slower, just because I was worried about my knees and just everything. But I was really surprised at how well I recovered. And I honestly believe that also is a testament to strength training. So it's your body knowing how to flush out that soreness, because we break our muscles down in the gym regularly.
That was super fun, but I think not what most people will be doing the day after they ran a marathon.
Yeah, probably not. And I don't know if I would book it that way again, to be honest. But it was really fun to go relax and just have a change of scenery too. We went to Steamboat Springs and it was just absolutely beautiful and I would love to go back.
Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. You learn maybe some of the things that we do before races, during, and some things that you can implement in your next race. We love seeing what you guys want to hear. So if you guys like nutrition, if you like training, the types of topics you guys would like for us to talk about, put those in the comments below and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thanks for following along with this journey. It's been so much fun to share with you all and we can't wait to continue sharing more.